Well, welcome back. Today I am going to speak on why it is important to know how to and to have the confidence and courage as a man to say no in your relationships. In my personal life, I have always made myself a promise, and that promise was that I would never become a hostage in any relationship, and that I would never hold anyone hostage in any relationship. I really believe in freedom. I really believe that we as human beings are supposed to be able to choose, decide the life we want to lead, and pursue that path. And whenever I've come across people who give ultimatums in relationships, or people who put down what I consider to be unreasonable, non-negotiable requests, I've always consulted on the basis that you should walk away from that relationship. Despite what the benefits of the relationship might be, as a man, the moment you start to negotiate, that usually marks the end of your manhood. Now, the United States and Great Britain have a very, very non-negotiable rule when it comes to international relations or geopolitics. And that is that in Great Britain, we do not negotiate with terrorists. We do not do that because once you start the negotiation process, it begets another demand, and it begets another demand, and therefore your enemies see that as a point of weakness and use that as a leverage point to get you to give more or to agree to more demands. And most modern Western countries have simply made a principle that they will not negotiate with terrorists. I'm not comparing a woman to being a terrorist. I'm not comparing who you are dating or who is in your life with a terrorist. I'm comparing the principle that the moment you start to consider making a drastic change to satisfy another person's need at a point when that change is something you are not ready for, then you will bow into an ultimatum. You'll bow into a demand. And in many ways, that principle is no different from negotiating with a terrorist. My perspective has always been the same. The moment an ultimatum, an unreasonable demand, an unreasonable request is made, that is the point in time when you should walk away. Now, there are usually two parts of when demands can be put forward to men: before the relationship begins and during the relationship. Irrespective of when the demand is put forward, the same attitude should be that this is someone who belongs to someone else and not you, and that it's time for the person to find whatever makes them happy and whatever makes them fulfilled, and whoever could satisfy that desire. Now, I have no tolerance, absolutely no tolerance for ultimatums, for people who nag, for people who bitch. I have no tolerance for fights, arguments, long-term quarrels, none. In all these years, I have perhaps, with the exception of once, when I was still, even before I became a teenager, I had an argument in a relationship I was in. And ever since then, I said to myself, there is something completely wrong with the energy that comes with ultimatums and nagging and bitching and fighting and argument. Unlike most people, I do not really consider make-up sex to be necessary. I think you can be respectful. Now, I was raised by an amazing father and a fascinating and an admirable mother, a great mother. And I never argued. I never saw my father argue with people. I never saw my mother get into arguments with people. I did a lot of things wrong. And the method of correction was always dialogue. And so I grew up in an environment where people were taught how to disagree with each other in good faith. Disagree with another person, but keeping in mind that the relationship was more important than the idea behind the argument. For most people, whenever we have an ideology that becomes more important than the relationship would always fail. And so whenever an ultimatum is put forward, and this is perhaps why I have very, very low tolerance for ultimatums. An ultimatum is often placed above the relationship. It comes in the form of you need to stay away from your friends or those friends of yours. Otherwise, this relationship we have is over. You need to stop smoking. Otherwise, this relationship is over. If you don't get married to me, or if you do not propose to me before the end of this year, I will keep myself open to other opportunities. If we do not get married by the time I'm 26, this relationship is over. If you do not stop playing video games, if you do not stop drinking with your friends and your buddies, if you do not stop smoking weed, I am going to leave. All of those ultimatums are placed above the relationship. And what I find unacceptable about ultimatums is that the time that was invested in the relationship, and that could be 6 years and 7 years, is treated as absolutely nothing by the person who issues the ultimatum. And whenever someone issues you an ultimatum, they have just indicated to you what they really think of the time you have invested in the relationship. And I would encourage men to consider nagging, bitching, fighting, arguments, people with disagreeable attitudes, to be similar to ultimatums, and to have zero tolerance for any of those. Peace, serenity is what a man needs. Unlike most people, I do not believe that eccentricity extends to being a bitch or to being irritating or to having a poor attitude. You can be eccentric, but also still considerate. Now, my position is I understand why people give ultimatums and why people have significant demands of other people in a relationship. I get it. My view is that if the person that you issue the ultimatum to agrees to that ultimatum, they get a prisoner for a mate. You, the person who has accepted the ultimatum, become imprisoned. Because in most cases, it's not that the ultimatum is unreasonable beyond comprehension. It's that maybe the timing, the mannerism, the extent of the demand does not accord with your goals, your vision, your timing. And perhaps this is an important thing that women should take into consideration. Most of the time, the ultimatum you're putting forward is something that is familiar to us. If we haven't accepted those terms before you issue the terms, it is an indication that we are not ready, or perhaps you're not the person, you're not the right one. A woman who says, I need you to get married to me this year, otherwise this relationship is over. I have been waiting for 6 years. The reason we haven't done it has more to do with the fact that we have doubts, we have uncertainties, we have concerns, we have fears, and most of them relate to whether we believe you are the right person. And even if when we are married to you, when the ultimatum is issued, those concerns and doubts simply reinforce the point to us that perhaps we made a mistake in choosing you. I would always say, if you are in a relationship or if you're about to begin a relationship, stay away from people who try to change you, fundamentally change you. Progress is an important part of life and how we grow. As a matter of fact, part of our joy and sense of fulfillment comes from progress. The pursuit of a goal, a meaningful goal, a goal that has purpose, and the realization of some of that goal or all of the goal is a pathway towards progress. However, there are times when what should be a progressive development becomes an obsessive ultimatum. It becomes a project that has one purpose and one purpose only, which is to change who you are. Now, usually in relationships, for some reason, and this is not exclusive to modern women in the West, this is something that is perhaps innately and intrinsically part of a woman's nature. A woman has a nurturing nature, and therefore it's a woman's purpose to bring out the best or to improve whatever she comes across. You give a woman seed, she gives you a child. You give a woman ingredients for a meal, she produces a meal for you. You give a woman a house, she gives you a home. Now, but all of those three aspects require the right woman, and the fact that she has to have been trained on how to bring out the best. Like an incubator will always bring forth. It doesn't really matter what is incubated. Whatever you put in the incubator is brought forth. Therefore, in the absence of a wise woman, an unwise woman will go through the process of trying to change a man. A wise woman, on the other hand, understands that you can't change people. It is hard enough changing myself, something that I've been doing on a full-time basis and something that I have failed miserably at, and I will continue to fail. Those who issue ultimatums forget that if they were to look at themselves and recognize how difficult it has been to change themselves, then they will become a little bit more empathetic towards changing other people. My view has always been, rather than try to give ultimatums or nag or bitch or argue or make silly comments or remarks, my view has always been to be honest from day one, to have no shame, to be free, to say what you want. And I'll use a good example. Let's say you, the woman, smoke, and I do not smoke, which I don't. It's not my role, it's not my place to change you or to stop you from smoking. I have to accept you where I meet you, which is the moment I met you, you were a smoker. It's not my role, it's not my place to give you an ultimatum or to issue a request for you to stop smoking. Otherwise, I will stop seeing you. That is completely wrong. And any woman who tolerates that from a man needs to reappraise what she thinks of herself, because that should not be tolerated. I would say the moment a man issues an ultimatum like that, dump him and move on. However, I can, and I am within my rights to say that I do not smoke, and I do not see myself being in a serious relationship or being married to anyone who smokes. That is quite different, because I am issuing to myself a reminder not to, I guess you could say, waiver on what I believe. Now, it doesn't mean what I believe is correct. It doesn't mean what I believe is right. It just simply means I have stated what I want. You, the lady, can say, well, I will not be married to a man, or I do not see myself in a relationship with someone who will not accept that I smoke. What we've then created is two perfect scenarios, two separate visions. My vision is different from your vision. We have a division. We can hang out, we can be friends with benefits, but we will never be in a relationship. If both of us begin from day one with that clarity, with that level of honesty, and most importantly, with the resolve not to renegade on our position, not to negotiate based on how many days you are allowed to smoke, where you are allowed to smoke, when you are allowed to smoke. If we stick to our position from day one, both of us can have a great time together, casually, but it means we'll never transcend from the dating marketplace to the relationship marketplace. And that's perfectly fine, because we are being true to ourselves. On the other hand, if you, the lady, succumb to my demand and you give up smoking, for my sake, and you've given up smoking not because it's healthy for you long term, not because it prevents all the various elements that come with smoking, not because it's your decision, but because it's my decision and my timing, there will be a resentment. In many ways, sometimes you find people maintain that habit they once had, but they do it in a deceptive way. You smoke at work. When you go out with friends, you smoke where you will not be seen. You are still doing what you really want to do, but you're living a double life. And my view has always been never to lead a life that was considered to be a fake, something that was not consistent, incongruent, to lack integrity. My view has always been to stay faithful to what I think is mine, which is my mind. I can control my mind, which means I can control myself. So I would simply say, stay away from people, men, stay away from women who try to change you. And I can promise you, as night follows day, she will change you. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Of course. But when we're talking about generalizations, the exception does not disprove the rule. She will change you. It may not be at the start of the relationship. It might come when she has achieved her dreams, which usually is the relationship, to be married, to be cohabiting, to move in with you, to be in a mono relationship with you. When she has exclusive rights to the relationship, when she controls the monopoly to sex, what you then find is people who use ultimatums, and they withdraw what was previously meant to be a good faith understanding of a mutual benefit both parties had. So for example, she says, if you keep smoking, you can't have sex with me, or I can't have sex with you on the nights that you smoke. So she's removed what was supposed to be something that was under the terms of the agreement, written or unwritten, or was meant to be something of benefit to you. So it's a punishment for not doing what she wants. Run. Guys, run away. And keep this in mind. Using my example of the lady who smokes, if she doesn't change, or if he doesn't change to get you, he or she will not change to keep you. And if he or she changes to get you, there's a very high chance that he or she will revert back to who they were when they have you, which is why you have this thing about, it's called the snapback effect. You pull a rubber band and you hold it as long as you want, but once you release, it snaps back to where it's always been. Behaviors are very, very hard to change, particularly without some form of self-image reengineering. Behaviors are very, very hard to change. And I am more concerned with people who change for my sake before the relationship begins, more so than I am actually concerned about people who change in the relationship. Because I know for a fact that incentives are very, very powerful in controlling behavior. If there is something a woman wants, she will suppress her most important desires. In this case, it could be she wants your last name. She will do whatever it takes. And the moment you're married, or the moment she has kids, which could have been one of her dreams, she will change. Then the makeover project begins. She then embarks on bringing you to where she thinks you should be. Stop playing video games, stop smoking, stop drinking, stop going out with your friends, stop smoking weed. She wants you to stop doing some hobbies that you always used to do. You love motorbikes, stop using motorbikes because you're now a father. Give up on that car, buy a more family designed car. Your racer car is probably not what you need now. You're no longer a bachelor. The moment all those ultimatums begin, that is a red flag. My view is always that red flags are something we can see from a distance. If you're willing to, I guess, think with your head, not your heart, at the early stages of the relationship, people seldom conceal their true intentions carefully. You can always find what people really, really want. Now, some people are great at masking what they want, but in many ways, women sometimes do this subconsciously. And sex is such a powerful tool that's used to control a man. Most men, our desire for ejaculation when we are in a relationship or when we want sex can be so powerful that we will move heaven and earth just to have what we want. And so you see most men changing themselves. Now, I actually think, and I believe this to be true, that a lot of the midlife crisis that men go through can be intrinsically linked to decisions they made based on ultimatums issued at a certain early stage of their lives by women, the consequence of which, sometime in the future, the woman has achieved what she wants. The man has now come into the realization that what he gave, in this case it could be kids, he gives up his career at 24 to be married, to have a family, and by 40, the children are now 16 and they've moved out of the house, or 18 and have moved out of the house, and suddenly there's an emptiness that sits in his heart because the goal was never his. Perhaps there was a dream he had before the relationship began or before the kids came. And the feeling of losing that dream creates a negative reaction in him where it feels as though he has no purpose for being, a sense of loss. And therefore he embarks on different things. He buys a fast car, effectively trying to relive his youth. If he's divorced, he looks for a woman who's very young. He grows a ponytail, pierces his ears, starts to dress in a certain way, but what he's trying to do is wrestle against reality. He's trying to relive the life that he should have led. And that life, in most cases, was sacrificed. I like to use the word sacrifice because I like to hope that he gave up something of a lower nature for something of a higher nature, but it was sacrificed at the time when he was not ready for that. But the ultimatum was so strong that he felt that he had to accept that faith. Now, let me conclude by saying that for some people, ultimatums are not something we issue verbally. Sometimes we do it in our gestures. We do it without making it explicit. It's something done implicitly. And a lot of men, especially considering that we have now the second generation of men raised since the 1970s, and men who were raised by women alone, feminist mothers, single parent families, men who were raised to be feminine in their nature. And so what you find is very few men today really know how to say no. They don't know how to stand up to mom, and therefore they do not know how to stand up to their partners. They do not know how to stand up to women. They will be walked all over because from a very young age they've been feminized. They've heard perhaps usually the first woman who was the first love of their life, their mothers, talk very badly about men, about their fathers, about their perspective about the patriarchy and all the nonsense that comes with such claptrap. And by the time these boys get to about 16 and 17, they're so weak. They're not assertive. They're not firm. They're not strong. They have no courage. They have no confidence, especially around women. You can have men who are in the Marine, in the UK military. You can have men who are UFC fighters, men who are hardworking go-getters. But when it comes to women, they have been so conditioned from a young age to accept ultimatums, to accept nagging, to accept bitching, to accept fights and arguments. A mother starts from a young age and says, if you don't do this, you're not coming into my house. Now, at 12, 15 and 16, you have no other place to go. So you accept the ultimatums. You have a mother that nags you to the point where you accept whatever she wants. And in many ways, being raised by a single mother, which most men have been, as a matter of fact, 1 in 3 kids today are raised in a single parent family today. And that just shows you that the crop of men we are producing are very weak. They do not know how to stand up for themselves. If you are one of those, all I can say to you is just say no. Yes, it will be painful. Yes, you might lose something that you really care for. But the one thing you will hold on to is the integrity of who you are. And that, my friend,